The Age of War Chapter 1 is almost over, and with Chapter 2 on the horizon, big things have been promised. With a rework of one of the game's oldest mechanics, this update could revolutionise the way we survive in Conan Exiles. The dev stream with all the juicy details happened yesterday on the 24th of August, and if you haven't got time to rewatch the stream, I'm going to recap it all here for you. So, without further ado, let's get started. There are two flagship features in this update, those being the Purge Rework and the Loot Rework. There's also combat changes, changes to dungeons, adjustments to how you get legendary weapons, bug fixes, and of course the usual Bazaar and Battle Pass stuff. There's also some small information about what we can expect from some aspects of Chapter 3. So, let's start off with the new Purge. The Purge Rework is the main flagship feature of the Age of War Chapter 2. The Purge has been a fairly unintuitive and underwhelming mechanic for a while, and after your first few purges, the system often becomes little more than a method of acquiring good thralls. I've played since 2019, and I can't really remember a time that I haven't seen people asking for it to change, so now it's finally being reworked. So, what's it all about? Well, firstly, the Purge Rework revamps the entire system. Unique purges based on map location are gone. Instead, the Stygian army will descend on your base no matter where you are. You get to choose when you want your purge, where you want it, and at what difficulty. It's all based around the treasure hoard mechanic introduced in Chapter 1, which serves as the opt-in function for the purge, and is what the purge focus on taking down. It's designed as a 15 to 20 minute encounter that you can play through at will, so if you've only got a bit of time and you just want to play a bit of Conan, the new Purge is ideal for that. The Purge isn't hard time limited or anything, but the targeted time is, as I said, around 15 to 20 minutes. Purge difficulty is dictated by how much treasure you have, going from seemingly a level 1 Purge at minuscule treasure to a level 10 Purge at the cap. The difficulty does scale up, and Dennis said that a level 10 Purge is fairly intense at the moment, but they could increase the difficulty even further with more levels in the future if warranted. You're eligible for a Purge from level 20 when you can learn and place the coffer, and the Purge is only interested in your treasure. They'll do their best to come in, steal and leave with their plunder. Treasure values have also been rebalanced, a specific example being that heroic treasures are now worth 5,000 gold rather than the 400 or 500 from before to incentivise actually getting them. One of the Purge rewards is more treasure, which is designed to fuel you in going up to the next Purge difficulty level. The treasure accountant also has some new UI which looks a lot cleaner and tells you what level your Purge is, alongside coffer value of course. One of the ideas with Chapter 2 was for the Purge to have siege machinery and wave diversity. Most of the siege equipment has been pushed back to Chapter 3, presumably for extra QA and testing, and it seems they used the time trade-off to improve the core mechanics. That being said, it seems the wave diversity is still in, and it does appear that there will be a lot of different enemies to fight. To trigger a Purge, you must boast about your wealth. Click on the coffer and click Proclaim Wealth. When you do so on the treasure hoard, the Purge will begin to scout your base. If they can't reach your base or your treasure room, the Purge just will not spawn, and you'll get a detailed error message telling you what to fix. If you summon a Purge and then try to game the system by removing access to the treasure room after the Purge spawns, the Purge will simply cancel and will also give a detailed error message. If the scouting is successful, an enemy forward operating base will spawn outside your walls and the Purge begins. Enemies will run from the fob to your gates and they'll go for the shortest route possible. You can also knock out and enthrall almost every single enemy in the Purge aside from the commander, though I have seen some beta feedback that currently isn't the case, but it will probably be fixed by the time it comes to live release. Something I found really interesting are amongst the enemies are demolishers, enemies who will wield battering rams and attempt to break down your doors. Demolishers can be stunned out of their attempts to destroy pieces if you're proactive about it. Demolishers also can't carry loot, seeing as they're carrying a big battering ram. Instead, they just want to smash, so they'll actively destroy other parts of your base just to make it easier for raiders to get to your treasure room. I'm getting a very chaotic vibe from them. The demolishers can actually destroy the coffer if they break the foundation beneath it, which will cancel the Purge. Kinda goofy, but also kinda funny as well. The Purge technically isn't victorious if that happens, but neither are you, and also you'll probably have lost a decent amount to repair, so there's still some sort of trade-off there. As I mentioned before, there's a wide variety of different enemies and wave types, from just a prisoner rush, to a seer, to pikemen, and plenty more. If you're unable to hold the attackers off, enemies will make it to the treasure hoard and begin to steal things from the chest. If they make it back to the fob, they'll be successful, and after a certain amount of treasure the Purge will leave, and that will downgrade your treasure hoard by, it seems like, roughly 1 level. They didn't exactly say for certain. I didn't really get the impression that they'll steal absolutely everything, just enough to kinda set you back and give you the will to rebuild without completely wiping you out. On the other side of the coin, victory seems to be able to either repair your losses or even offer a net profit in terms of treasure and resources. Whenever I mention the Purge, I've seen a lot of people bring up named thralls. Though the Purge are indeed mostly Stygians, you can still get named thralls. Some of them will come from fighters that attack, and others will be kept in cages inside the forward operating base, which can be opened after defeating the Purge. There currently seem to be no beasts in the Purge, though it's possible that there will be in the future. The difficulty of each level of Purge will also depend on how many players and thralls are active in defence. If you're a solo player with 1 or 2 thralls, you probably won't get too many enemies. However, if you're in a clan with 6 or 8 players and a whole bunch of thralls actively participating in the Purge, expect to see a lot of enemies. This is also true for players outside of your clan too, so if you have friends that are solos or in another clan, they can also help you with your Purge, and the Purge will scale according to their involvement. To finish the Purge, you must defeat the Commander. He's a 2 skull boss enemy, and if you defeat him, you'll get some keys to open the cages inside the fob, alongside at least 1 loot chest too. When you open up the cages, they will have NPCs in them. One of the NPCs you can meet is Iskar the Sellsword. He's not a guaranteed spawn, but Dennis said he's a pretty high chance to spawn. You can transfer the treasure in your coffer into gold coins, which you can spend with Iskar. He sells some basic stuff like siege boulders, explosive jars, etc, but he also sells new mercenary banners. If you place them down, they call temporary mercenaries to your side, which is designed to help you with higher Purge difficulties. These mercenaries do not interfere with the follower cap, which is very nice for people that have a lot of thralls. Currently, multiple Purges can be active at the same time on a server, which is something that was not previously possible. I'm hoping this doesn't affect server performance too bad. I'm hoping that this has been thoroughly tested and it won't, but servers are strange things and, well, you never really know for sure. Also, given the new spawning logic of the Purge, it seems they will basically never spawn inside your base anymore, which is very nice to see. Purges are also entirely moddable, so the Purge mod should be pretty flexible. Overall, I very much like the look of the new Purge. You all already know I'm more of a builder and a lore guy as opposed to PvE, but this really makes me want to engage with the Purge. I'll be working on a video about the new Purge after I finish this recap, and I'm very excited to give it a try. The other main feature of Chapter 2 is the loot rework. This rework is being undertaken because, as Dennis said, basically, loot is boring and often doesn't make sense. These changes aim to fix that. Firstly, dismantling gets a big buff, which makes the new loot from enemy camps more useful, even if you just disassemble the items you get. That new loot is that camps no longer have basic resources like stone, plant fibres, etc. This is true for both loot chests in the camp and seemingly enemies within them too. There will be overall more useful loot, and the loot is localised based on the occupants. Vanilla camps have vanilla items, Dafari have Dafari, etc. Camps also have new interactables like Siptar already does, such as helmets or swords lying around that you can actually pick up. One of the big and possibly controversial changes is that legendary chests no longer spawn in the overworld. Dennis said that legendary weapons essentially break low-level progression, and thus they decided to change it, which I do agree with. Legendary chests can now only be found at the end of dungeons, so for example you can stack up your skeleton keys from world bosses as they are still in the game, then go in and you'll get a legendary weapon or two alongside the dungeon loot. Most of us have probably ran through these dungeons 10, 20, 50 times, so why do we want to go into the dungeons again? Well, aside from legendary weapons, dungeons have had a bit of a refresh. They have new traps, optional bosses, and new content to make them more interesting, increase replayability, and make them more worthwhile in terms of loot. This wasn't expressly said, but the changes to basic resources no longer dropping from enemies presumably is reflected in dungeons, in which case the overall loot should be improved, and hopefully this mini refresh adds more replayability and interest, even to low level dungeons like the Dregs. Another thing Dennis mentioned was that the library of esoteric artifacts and the Void Forge now give recipes in order. In my limited interactions with them, I found it very frustrating that basically you're relying on RNG to get anything you actually want from the library or the Void Forge, and I know some other people aren't a massive fan of it. Therefore, the recipes now, as I mentioned, drop in order, so if you say, for example, get the kiln on the 5th hand in, then that is the order you will always get the kiln in, and that order is universal for everyone. A very simple change, but a very warranted one to make it more consistent. From the patch notes, grinders and the fluid press also have recipes for plants and seeds they did not have before too. Overall, I like the loot rework. I think on paper it doesn't sound too impactful and it might sound a bit, well, not exactly underwhelming, but something or nothing. But I think when we actually play through it, I think the difference will be very tangible. Loot has been, well, kinda boring in Conan for a long time, and that's part of the reason why NPC camps aren't really that engaging of content. I mean, why bother fighting through 20 or 30 guys to get plant fibre, hide, stuff like that? So I think that the buffs to dismantling, so I think that the changes to loot localization, and the dismantling buff should be much, much better. As for the legendary chests, I already predict that people have very mixed opinions on this. I personally think it's a really good idea, and I hope that does come off in the execution as well. There's some other noteworthy stuff outside of the flagship features. The first is that there's some more combat changes. Firstly, there are some changes coming to the Siege Cauldron. Now I'll admit I've never actually used these before, so I don't know how they function beforehand, but now there is a cauldron for oil and a cauldron for fire. You can pour these down on attackers, they do visually pour, and it does look very good, and it seems that targeting them is a lot easier to work out now. They also mentioned some changes to how thralls behave, in that you can essentially put them down in sockets around your base. For archers, this basically turns them into turrets. Unfortunately, this won't be implemented for archers until Chapter 3, but the devs did mention it quite heavily on stream, and it appears a similar system is present for just melee thralls as well. I wasn't 100% clear if it will be coming in this update or whether it's a preview for Chapter 3, but either way those will be very good and should stop like your archers just wandering around your walls or trying to run down 3 stories to fight a crocodile. There are some other combat changes. Some will affect PvP a little bit, some will affect PvP a lot. I'd just like to preface this again by saying I have no knowledge of PvP, and thus no real opinion. So firstly, Steel Theud perk has been nerfed. The perk now prevents you from receiving 33% of your health as damage in a single hit rather than 25, which essentially means you can now die in 3 hits rather than 4, offering a little less security with Steel Theud. The Last Stand perk has received a nerf too, and it now lasts for 3 seconds instead of 6. Javelins and other missile weapons have had a damage buff. I'm not sure if this is just a blanket damage buff or whether it's just to the thrown aspect of those weapons. To be frank, I didn't even know javelins existed till a few months ago, but you know, if it makes them more usable, that's good. All thrown orbs will now detonate instantly on impact regardless of if you use the light or heavy attack. There's also a nerf to the bow and arrow playstyle. Arrows have received a more realistic curve, and damage fall-off at distance has been added to reduce aggressiveness. Bows have a pretty insane effective range currently, so this is designed to pull that range in a bit and rein the bows in. The next 2 changes are controversial, judging by the reception of the PvP players in the dev chat, but alas, God Bubbles have been entirely removed, and avatars last 10 times longer, but deal 10 times less damage, and you can also cancel out of the avatar manually. As I said before, I'm not really a PvP player, and I don't think I ever will be, so I don't really have an opinion on that. Although being able to manually cancel out the avatar is very good. Whenever I've had to go into an avatar for a video, it's a pain just waiting for it to deplete. Trebuchet health has immediately increased from 5,000 to 10,000, and crafting time generally decreased to a total of 10 minutes. This is designed to incentivise treb raiding. Also, non-explosive barrages now have less splash damage. The final stated change is kind of a small one, but also a really big one. There's some new fighting animations that allow you to retarget mid-attack. Dennis said that most attacks get about 90 degrees of tolerance. It's kind of hard to show, but apparently very easy to feel, and it makes more precise weapons like short swords and spears much more effective and flexible. This mechanic apparently cuts off as soon as the weapon gets to the portion of the animation where damage is inflicted, so it might be more noticeable on slow weapons. Target lock is of course still a thing, though this might make unlocked combat a bit easier. As a fellow unlocked combat enjoyer, I do quite like this change. However, enemies can also do this, so they'll be keeping an eye on problematic enemies to see if they need to have the ability to pivot their attacks adjusted or indeed just entirely removed. I can imagine that just this small change will make quite a few enemies a bit tougher. There are a couple of miscellaneous things mentioned. The convergence trap has essentially been changed to a decorative item, seeing as the purge has changed. I quite like the visuals of the convergence trap, so I don't mind that, but there might be a use for it in the future. They've also added a base game snake pet, which you can get by picking up and presumably hatching snake eggs. The devs showed off some new treasures and treasure pile designs. The treasure piles were both small and large and had some swords, gems, etc. in them. And there was also some other new treasures like a hanging rug, a sarcophagus, etc. They also noted that the treasure accountant's constant scribbling might be adjusted to reduce how annoying it can be. It's something they're aware of. We didn't actually get to see too much of what's in the Battle Pass or the Bazaar. At one point Andy said that he wanted to keep the Battle Pass somewhat spoiler free, so he only showed a couple of pages, which I don't mind. I'm quite happy to wait until the live servers to actually see what's on the Battle Pass. What we did see, however, is pretty impressive stuff. There is a Stygian-style pyramid building set with large pillars, constructible pyramids with varying slope gradients, and concealed doors for your pyramid chambers. I love this. I absolutely love this. There are hieroglyphics on the wall, there's all sorts. I used to love ancient Egypt as a kid and kinda still do, so this is, very much my wheelhouse. And when this does come out, I'll be trying my best not to overuse it horribly like I do with Numidian and Arena. There's a new armour set which is apparently ported over from Age of Conan. I believe Andy called it the Intricate Spite set. It looks very nice. There's also a new bearer pack design. This could be in the Battle Pass or Bazaar, I'm not quite sure. They did only show a few pages of the Battle Pass. There are some, of course, new emblems, some armours, a new shield with an emblem display, a treasure chest reskin, new placeables and emotes, some new Relic Hunter themed tools as well, and there's also an Egyptian mummy style outfit, though I'm not sure if that was in the Battle Pass or the Bazaar. Of course, when the AoW Chapter 2 does come to the live servers, I will be covering all the Battle Pass rewards in detail. On the Bazaar front, we did see a few bundles, though many of them had the FPO graphics, so we're not 100% certain exactly what's included in them. Those bundles were King of the Hill, Chieftain of the North, which Andy did try on. It's a very Nordic design with a cape and a polar bear, so, as the kids say, big drip. There was War-Torn Numidian Ruins as a building set, which looked okay, but also very, very niche. I think the pricing on that is something to keep an eye on when it does come to the game. I can kind of see some uses in it, but also it might be a bit too destroyed to get use out of it. I'm not too sure. There was also a Vendian Treasure Hunter outfit, which I believe was from the Bazaar, but could also have been from the Battle Pass. And there's also a reskin for the Snake Pet, which is definitely in the Battle Pass too. Additionally, there is a library set with bookcases, again presumably on the Bazaar, which is quite a bit different from the current bookcases we have, in that they're not secret doors, so they don't need no door frames, they just clip against the wall, they snap with each other. It looks like there's one of those ladders from the old libraries as well that look like it's kind of movable, although I doubt it is movable. Overall, very excited for the library set. As for bug fixes, they did mention a few, and there are also a few notable ones in the patch notes. It seems that purges spawning inside bases has been fixed by proxy, in that the new purge system just doesn't allow that to happen. There are also fixes coming to the Isle of Siptar and for invisible enemies. They didn't say what was causing the Siptar issue, but they did say it should be fixed with this update going live on the actual live servers, and the invisible enemies issue had a bit more detail. Apparently it was caused by middleware, which is something used to ship the game, which encountered texture streaming problems. Apparently this fix is quite difficult, but it should be fixed when the Age of War Chapter 2 releases to the live servers. That has apparently currently been fixed in the beta for rhinos, in that they are no longer invisible. There are many smaller fixes in the bug fixes segment of the patch notes. There's some things like making Warmaker Clail actually stand up rather than sitting down, removing some outdated loading screen tips, and just generally some much smaller adjustments. One of the notable fixes is that dismantling legendary items will now give back 100% of their dismantle value regardless of their durability. Tools will no longer inflict damage on resources they cannot harvest, and the sandstorm will no longer spawn inside of the Sunken City dungeon. Looking forward to Chapter 3, there was a mention of a few things that I've already kind of mentioned before, such as the siege machinery for the new Purge, turret archers for your own defense, and apparently in Chapter 3 there will be a new system that will allow you to call NPCs like Iskar the Sellsword to your camp at will. Details on that were very scant, but it will be interesting to see how that plays out. In Chapter 3, apparently players will also be able to use the battering ram that demolishers have, mostly for the PvE raid I imagine, but it will presumably also work for PvP. Overall, I am pretty excited for this update. I've always been a builder. I was a builder in Ark, and I've been a builder in Conan since early 2019, having only really dabbled in PvE. However, the Purge Rework really makes me want to play more PvE. I'm a sucker for siege mechanics, and when it's fully realised with siege machinery in Chapter 3 it'll be even better, but I think the core mechanics and execution seem solid. The loot rework is also desperately needed. In the PvE I have played, loot is exactly as Dennis described it, boring and doesn't really make sense. Nobody wants 5 pieces of regular hide or 30 plant fibre, so the changes seem very positive to me. I also like the idea of the changes to legendary chests and dungeons. We'll have to see exactly how it plays out, but I think it's a healthy choice for the game. The combat changes also seem good. When it comes to god bubbles and avatars, you already know that I know exactly nothing about PvP, and to be frank I don't think I'd ever really be interested, so you can exclude them from the statement of it seeming good if you like. I don't really have an opinion on those. Some in the chat were pretty aggrieved at the changes to god bubbles, and again, I don't really have an opinion. If it's healthier in the long run, I'm all for it, but this is not my area of expertise at all. Overall, I think I'm pretty happy with this update. I mentioned beforehand that I wouldn't be surprised if the Purge changes make up the majority of the features in this update, and it seems that guess was correct. If the Purge is engaging enough, that feature balance is warranted, and I think people are probably going to have a lot of fun with the Purge. The loot balance is also going to be really healthy for the game and for making raiding camps and such actually worth it, alongside the extra replayability for the dungeons. So now you're probably wondering when you can jump in and play the new update. Well, the public beta client has already been updated and is live right now on PC. If you're on consoles, you have a little bit of a wait ahead of you. The Age of War Chapter 2 fully releases on September 21st, 2023, giving a testing period of almost an entire month. This is a bit longer than the previous test periods we've had, but there's a lot of moving parts in this, so I think it is warranted. Overall though, I'm left with a very positive impression of Chapter 2. If you have any questions about stuff, because, well, the process of taking notes of streams like this is very frenetic and it is possible I've missed some stuff, do feel free to ask them in the comments. I'll do the best I can, and I'll also leave the full patch notes in the description too. And there we have it, your full recap of the Age of War Chapter 2 dev stream. These streams are pretty lengthy, so if you've enjoyed my coverage, drop a like on the video, it always helps out. Thank you for watching, and of course a massive thanks to our wonderful esteemed coffee cultists for continuing to support the channel over on Patreon. I very much like the look of the new Purge, so I'll be trying it out extensively. For coverage of all things Conan Exiles, including all the new stuff from this update, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Again, thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you soon.